Okay, so we're just going to keep moving forward with my recap of a Netflix series, Ratched. We're on episode 4 of season 1, Angel of Mercy, part 2. But first, a brief recap of what we learned in episode 3, Angel of Mercy. So we found out that Dr. Hanover is actually Dr. Manuel. I cannot pronounce the last name, so we just gonna go with Dr. Manuel, who is actually in hiding from a woman named Mrs. Osgood, who hired him to treat her son, which resulted in some devastating consequences. So he has falsified his credentials and has landed his job as head of the Lucia State Hospital. All right, so we found out that Charles, the guy that Nurse Ratched kind of had a connection with when she first checked into the hotel, he is not a reporter, which I've said in this last video. He's actually a private investigator who has been hired by Mrs. Osgood to find Dr. Manuel / Dr. Hanover. Okay, and he has now gone from being an investigator to a hitman because now Mrs. Osgood wants Dr. Hanover / Dr. Manuel's head on a plate. She literally wants his head. Okay, that was her instructions to Charles. Bring me his head. Nurse Bucket, we find out that Nurse Bucket can be just as cruel. I don't know if her cruelty is something that's innate to her or if her cruelty is based on she feels like her position is now being threatened by Nurse Ratched, and so she's just basically trying to do whatever she can to accommodate Dr. Hanover / Dr. Manuel. I don't know, but Nurse Bucket does have a cruel streak, as we saw in the hydrotherapy scene. We also have Nurse Dolly, the young one who's a stupid wench who was completely inappropriate with Edmund Tolson, who of course is the serial killer who killed 4 priests and is actually there as a patient being to be evaluated for his ability to stand trial so they can decide whether or not they're going to move forward with the death penalty. We also find out that Mrs. Biggs' marriage is a marriage of convenience, which, of course, well, we didn't know that at first. We knew that she was homosexual, but once we met her, we were introduced to her husband, who's actually a black man, which I thought was very interesting. In 1947, you have this black man and this white woman who are married. He's a lawyer. He's made partner in this law firm, and she has decided that she is basically in love, infatuated in lust with Nurse Ratched, even though those feelings has not yet been reciprocated. But she has decided that she no longer wants to live this lie, and she wants a divorce so that she's free to pursue her relationship or a potential relationship with Nurse Ratched. Of course, her husband was like, you know what? We should probably think about this because everything that we've achieved, we've done together. So we should probably figure out if breaking up our marriage is the best thing for us to do at this point in our careers. And finally, Nurse Ratched has basically at this point solidified her position as Dr. Hanover's confidant, because he did reveal to her at the end of the scene why Mrs. Osgood is after him, and at this point she's the only other person that knows, obviously aside from Charles, who's trying to kill him. But I think at this point she has now solidified her position with him. So if you are interested in seeing my recap for season 1 episode 4, Angel of Mercy 2, stay tuned. Okay, so a lot happened in this episode, and a lot happened quite quickly. So Ratched went down to take Tolson his dinner, and of course she had to confront him about the whole situation with Dolly. And she's telling him how stupid he was and how he's going to jeopardize everything that they're working for. And he's saying that he's desperate for human contact, and how is he supposed to, if he ever gets out, how is he supposed to relate to people? He's not used to being around people, and if Dolly can't do it, then she's going to have to do it, and it's a whole thing. What they did to us in there, and she grabs her hand, I guess, to put it on his privacies, right? And then she was like, "I'm never going to do that to you again. Do that for you again." And he was like, "Well, if you don't do it, then I'm going to have to find somebody else to do it." And then he basically just shut down and just started eating his dinner. So she's now thinking, "Okay, Lord, what can I do to fix the situation?" So we flash to Briggs now. I'm not sure if this is the next day or, you know, the time frame of when this occurred, but the next thing you know, you see her with a suitcase. Her husband is actually preparing her lunch, and she appears with the suitcase, and of course he's shocked, and he's like, I can't, you know, I don't think this is right. I'm not going to let this happen. Da, 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 da. And she, you know, he goes and stands in front of the door, and he's like, he's not going to let her leave. And so she walks over and basically tells him if he doesn't get out of the way, then she's going to knock him out of the way. The thing is, like I said in the previous video, I probably didn't say this I think I did say that he's also, homosexual, and it's a marriage of convenience, but I think that he does care for her, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, you kind of, I mean, she's just like, I just don't want to pretend anymore. And eventually he just steps aside and she leaves. And there's only one motel in town. And so she goes she goes to check in. And of course the woman is all in her business and like, oh, you're a Mrs., so you're married, and oh, so what is this? And you know, she was like, do you ask all of your potential guests all these questions? She was like, well, yes, because basically everything is my business, and you know, the whole thing. And that's, you know, Nurse Ratched comes around and they see each other. She's like, oh, you know, I didn't know that you were staying here. You know, this is the only hotel. And then she tells her how she left her husband, and Nurse Ratched actually, you know, helps her, you know, get checked in, and, you know, they talk for a little while, and she starts, Nurse Ratched asks, well, was he violent? What, did he beat you? And she said, no, he's a good man. It's just that I could no longer live a lie. And, you know, basically I'm looking for, basically I want my heart's desire. And she kind of looked at, Nurse Ratched, and Nurse Ratched was like, well, okay, so, I have to go to work. So, I'll be talking to you later, I guess, maybe, sort of, but not really. Okay, bye. So she left. And so, Nurse Ratched and Dolly are now talking. And so Peter is in the common room, and Dolly's like, you know, it's so sad that, you know, he's still here, and, you know, he seemed to be in this old world. I mean, like, this young man, his life has just basically been destroyed. He's just so emotionless and joyless. It's like there's nothing. That's just, oh God, the choices people made back then. I mean, even now, but back then, Lord knows. And so, you can kind of see he's kind of just lost in his thoughts. And so, Nurse Ratched is like, well, do you dream a lot? And she starts asking her about, do you think about masturbation? And then of course she was like, well, why are you asking me if I masturbate? She was like, well, how often do you masturbate? And do you climax every time? And they're talking, and she was like, well, then you find out that Dolly, you know, her mother, she said her mother would, Dolly, she was like, she's always been attracted to a certain type of guy, and every time she would look at the boys, her mother would lash her 10 times to call her a whore. So obviously we see that Dolly was abused, okay? And she's talking about how she's always been attracted to dangerous guys, and so Nurse Ratched is like, oh, you sound like you're a nymphomaniac. It is a medical condition. Unfortunately, there is no cure. But, you know, she's going to take this opportunity to kind of get her okay with the idea of having a relationship with Tolson. And she was like, well, he's, don't you think that he's dangerous? You think that's a good idea? And she was like, well, yes, you know, she's trying to say this could be therapeutic for him. And she was like, well, how will we even do that with Nurse Bucket all over the place? And so Nurse Ratched has Nurse Bucket scheduled down packed. She knows what time she goes to lunch. She knows where she sits. She sits in the same spot. She eats the same thing. And so they're trying to coordinate to get Tolson from the basement. How she did that, I have no idea, but they got Tolson from the basement to the tub room where Dolly was supposed to meet him. Okay, so they have this whole thing where Dolly, she waits to see Nurse Bucket. She grabs her bags, she says her goodbyes, and Nurse Bucket goes to sit in her usual spot to have her lunch. Unfortunately, as soon as Nurse Bucket sits down to have her lunch, another nurse walks up and says, I need your help. Miss Cartwright is having a fit. She lost her wedding ring in the tub room, and we haven't been able to find it. Now, of course, just as I just told you, Nurse Bucket is in the tub room with Tolson waiting for Dolly. So there's this whole, climax where, now the music speeds up because you got Dolly walking to the room, and then you have Nurse Bucket walking in opposite directions. So they're actually walking to the room at the same time. You see Dolly's eyes get huge, like, oh my God. And then eventually the nurse that came and got her says, oh, well, we found it. And of course, Nurse Bucket is like, you know what? How about you actually search for this stuff before you come and disturb me while I'm having my lunch, okay? So, Nurse Bucket goes on, Dolly goes in, and she has, Nurse Ratched has, Tolson, he's still sitting in the wheelchair, and she has his legs shackled. And Dolly was like, does he have to wear the shackles? And Nurse Ratched actually looks concerned, like, are you sure you want me to take them off? And so she did. And Nurse Ratched was like, you got 5 minutes. She leaves. And of course, he's crazy. So he's like, that I can snap your neck with my bare hands, but I'm not going to do that. And so Dolly's like, well, what do you want to do? And he said, actually, right now, all I want is a kiss. And so he grabs her, they kiss. It's a whole weird moment. Okay, so the next thing you see Briggs rushing into the governor's office. She's like, okay, you know there's a problem. They said that you want to talk to me. He flings a newspaper on the desk and says, what do you see? And so she reads the paper, and the public opinion regarding the death penalty has gone up from 40-something% to 60-something%. And he's like, well, what do you think that means? And they say, well, they really want Tolson to be executed. And he's basically like, you need to get Hanover. We need to all be on the same page. He needs to give us what I need in order to have Tolson executed. And basically, I want to hear any more excuses. You need to get it done. Because at this point, Hanover has been MIA. She's saying that she's been trying to call him. She's not been able to reach him. Basically, the governor is like, you need to figure it out. Okay, so the next scene you see Ingrid. It's now time for Ingrid's appointment. Ingrid is the older woman who was having a sexual relationship with Mrs. Cartwright, and she had this. There's really emotional scene that she has with Ratched.
I want you to boil me until there is nothing left but cooked meat so tender that it falls off my bones and you can eat it with a spoon. You don't know what it's like to be constantly running from who you really are.
And so she's basically like, I'm ready to, I already know what to expect. I already spoke with Miss Cartwright, even though she didn't really want to talk to me. And Nurse Ratched is like, oh, well, it seems like the treatment is working. And then they have this really, Ingrid has this really emotional, kind of dialogue where she, she's talking about how she, has been trying to hide, has been trying to deal with this, her feelings of homosexuality. Of course, at the time, it was they considered it a mental illness. She's been trying to deal with this her whole life, and to the point where it drove her crazy. And basically, she's saying that's why she's there, the whole thing. So it was really, 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 really sad. So Nurse Ratched, she takes Ingrid to the room. Obviously, Finnegan is already there, and Nurse Bucket. You can see on Ingrid's face, she's terrified. She's like, just the horror on her face when she saw the tubs. And of course, Nurse Bucket has to give her a speech about, this is a wonderful day. You're going to come out a better person. This da-da-da-da. And then Finnegan is standing there, and he goes to turn on the tub, and it's making these noises, but it's not coming on. And so he goes over to, so Nurse Bucket waves him away. It's like, oh, just let me do it. And nothing's working. And she looks over, someone has cut the electrical cord because it's plugged into the wall. And she's like waving around this cord like, who did this? And, I'm going to find out who did this. And Finnegan was like, well, it is the wintertime, so the rats come in and sometimes they chew through cable. And so, they have a little, back and forth. And she basically told him that she was going to have him fired for insubordination because she just assumed that Finnegan did it. Well, she probably did, but she don't know that. So, I mean, they did buy buy Ingrid some time, her and Miss Cartwright or anybody else who was supposed to have that damn hydrotherapy crap. Anyway, so she ends up leaving. Charles returns to the hotel, and lunatic behind the counter, she's covered in leeches, right? And he's looking at her like, what the hell are you doing? And she was like, oh, well, this is how, she has arthritis or something, and I'm not paying 39 cents at the whatever store to get this quack medication. And so she's got leeches on her arms, leeches on her legs. She looks a goddamn mess, right? She looks like a ghoul, okay, with all the stuff on her. So he's asking her, did I have any messages? She was like, oh, yeah, you did have a phone call from a woman. She didn't leave a message. And then, you have a note from room 18. And the note was from, obviously, Nurse Ratched wanting to have another go, right? So next thing you know, again, she minding everybody's business. Well, so what is really going on between you and room 8? And he's like, that's really none of your business. She's like, it is my business because I don't allow fornication, especially I don't allow sex outside of marriage. And I'm like, this woman, if you look at this woman, girl, you do not look all that picky and all that uptight and ridiculous, girl. Shut up. So he basically just waved her off and like, I need to make a phone call and I need privacy. And so so she ends up leaving. She puts the phone up on the table and she leaves, and he calls Miss Osgood and basically said it's going to take, she thought that he was calling to say that the job was done, but he's like, no, actually Hanover's in the wind and I'm still trying to find him. And she basically said that for every day that I don't have his head on my table, I'm going to take $50,000 off of your fee. And so while he's talking, you see Mrs. Briggs come around the corner, and she kind of overhear part of the conversation, and then he leaves. And then she follows him, and he goes to Nurse Ratched's room. So he gets into the room. Nurse Ratched already knows who he is. But she doesn't, at this point, she doesn't know who he works. Well, actually, she does, because of the previous conversation, now that I think about it. And so she's like, I know that you're trying to kill Dr. Hanover, and I'm going to help you. I think, he's working to, this has been her thing, right? Trying to convince people that they're on the same page when it comes to Tolson, and how he's a monster and a murderer, and he should be executed, and she's really landed on thick, right? And then, I guess to put him at ease, she proceeds to sleep with him again. And she was like, I want you to take back, because the last time they had sex, she was like, you're the worst lay I ever had. And so now they in there getting down with the get down. And Briggs is outside the door so she can hear them having sex. So of course, she feels some kind of way. And so after they have sex, Nurse Ratched is saying, she has to go back to work. And so she's telling him, I just go back to your room, get cleaned up. I'll call Hanover. I know how to find him. I'll call him, have him come to the hospital, and basically you can do whatever it is that you need to do. Okay, so that was the plan. So he ends up driving. So a lot of stuff happens at this point. So he actually leaves the room. Briggs' room is directly across from Nurse Ratched's room, so she could see him leaving the room. As soon as he leaves the room, she goes over and knocks on the door. She goes over and knocks on the door. Nurse Ratched is basically like, well, what are you doing here? What do you want? She was like, who was that? And she starts asking her questions. She was basically like, that is really none of your business. And so Briggs is clearly annoyed. And she basically told her, look, the governor wants Tolson executed, and he needs Hanover to give him the information he needs to have Tolson executed, or else you're going to lose your funding. So she obviously that's coming. Actually, he does want that to happen, but that's obviously coming from also she's hurt and she's jealous because she's in love with Nurse Ratched. I don't even want to call her Nurse Ratched, and at this point, it's not being reciprocated. So the next thing you know, you see Charles and Nurse Ratched in the car. And they're on their way to the hospital. They get to the hospital, and Nurse Ratched distracts the nurse at the front desk, and so that Charles can slip by. She tells him where Hanover's office is, and he heads upstairs. And she's walking down the hall. Finnegan walks up to her and was like, I need to talk to you. Bucket was able to fix the tub, and Cartwright's therapy is scheduled for like 8 a.m. the following morning. So she's now like, okay, she's trying to figure out how she's going to make all this work. So she tells Finnegan, go and get Cartwright. Okay, so at this point, Charles has made it up to Hanover's office, and he's kind of looking around. He's looking through his desk drawers. Finnegan goes into Cartwright's room to wake her up. He gets her up and out of bed. And while Hanover is distracted, he heard a noise or something. He's now has his gun out. He's now looking around the office. Hanover sneaks up and basically bashes Charles in the head. He's down. Okay. So at this time, Briggs arrives. So she actually leaves the hotel. She goes up to the hospital. As she's pulling up, she sees Finnegan running out of the hospital with Cartwright, and he got her in the car. So he's about to take her away. Finnegan, Briggs walks up to the window, and also the window's like, "What are you doing with this patient?" And Finnegan was like, "She's not a patient," and he pulls off. So the next thing, we see, Nurse Ratched. She's now in the office. Hanover, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. Now she was like, okay, help me move the body. So they get his body in a wheelchair. They're rolling down the hall. And was it the security guard that said, oh, well, who is that? And, they have to make up some story about him being new. And we're taking him to the tub for therapy. So they get him in the tub. They get him locked into the tub. And they turn the heat up to 150 degrees. And they leave him in the tub. Okay. So at this point, he's starting to wake up, but he's still kind of out of it. Okay. So she sends Hanover back to his office to clean up. Nurse Ratched actually goes into Ingrid's room now to wake her up, to get her up and out of bed. Briggs now makes it to Hanover's office. So it's, she's walking through the office. Hanover is in, so Briggs goes into Hanover's office, and she's kind of calling his name. They flash back to Charles. Charles is down, boiling in this tub, right? And he's trying to break the locks on the doors to get out of the tub. Hanover is in his office. He's in the back office where the medications are, and he's shooting up. His ass is choosing this time to get high, right? So Hanover walks in, and she sees blood on the carpet, and she's like, okay, well, is this blood? And so he's like, well, what are you doing here? And of course she's like, well, we've been trying to get in contact with you. And there's like a lot of flashing back and forth because there's so much going on at one time. Next thing you see Nurse Ratched. She's leading Ingrid out of the hotel. They finally see, I don't know, somebody pulled up. There was a horn or something, and they start running. Charles is able to get out of this tub, and he looks like, the only thing that I could think of, I don't know if you guys remember the first RoboCop, when the truck ran into like this toxic waste vat, and then the guy got up, and his skin was like all falling off. He looked a hot mess. I don't know if you guys remember that. That's what you could think of when you see how Charles looked when he finally gets out of this tub. So Ingrid and Nurse Ratched are running. They are finally they hear a horn. It's Finnegan. So Finnegan actually came back because he was waiting, because he wanted to take Ingrid and Miss Cartwright. He wanted to take them both ways so they could be together. And that be it. So Nurse Ratched ends up giving them all the money she could get, and she tells Ingrid that, I just want you to know, I know exactly I know exactly how you feel. And so they say their goodbyes. She turns around. She realizes Charles' car is still parked in the parking lot. So she goes in. She's about to go up to the tub room, and I don't know if she heard something, or the fact that she didn't hear anything. She didn't hear him screaming or anything. At this point, he's out of the tub, he's on the floor, and he's dragging himself towards the door. So she walks away. He opens the door. He falls out of the room. At this point, the security guard is escorting Peter. Peter he had gotten out of bed to go get something to drink. The security guard is escorting him back to his room. Unfortunately, Peter crosses the hall where Charles is now standing with his skin falling all off, And so the security guard initially did not see Charles down the hall. And so, but Peter did. So Peter stops in his tracks. He drops his glass. It shatters. That's what brought the security guard back down. That's when the security guard saw Charles in the hall. So we flash back to Hanover. Hanover and Briggs, they're talking at this point. And actually, no. So the security guard is trying to get Peter to go back to his room. He's trying to get the security guard is going for his gun. Then you see Hanover and Briggs. They're talking. He was like, well, she's telling him like the governor wants, you know, this thing to happen with Tolson. He wants you to go for the death penalty. Nurse Ratched comes in and she's like, okay, what's going on here? Next thing you know, bang, 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 gunshots go out. They all run to see what's going on. And poor Peter, he's just traumatized at this point. This young boy who's already had this medical procedure done on him, that was unnecessary. And now he sees this ghoul, what looks like a ghoul in the hallway, and then the security guard shoots the man dead. It was just a whole lot. It was a whole lot. So Harold is the security guard. And so now they're standing there. Harold and Peter are standing there. Nurse Ratched, Briggs, and Dr. Hanover, they come out and they're trying to figure out what's going on. Next thing you know, of course, Briggs is like, what happened? So Hanover was like, well, we had him in the tub for therapy, and then, you know, we heard about an intruder. And so now Nurse Ratched is trying to make it seem like it's Briggs' fault. Like we heard that there was an intruder, and so we wanted to make sure our patients were safe. She's like an intruder. Then Nurse Ratched was like, yes, you. We heard that, you know, you were the person that came in and distracted. Basically, that's what she was trying to say. And they were like, we need to call the cops. And she was like, yeah. So Briggs wanted to stay and talk to the cops, but Nurse Ratched was like, I don't think that's going to be a good idea. And she was like, well, how would it look? So basically, how they sold the term was, how would it look to have the governor's secretary here when something like this happens? And so they made it seem like they were doing this to protect her. So she ends up leaving. They clean up. They put his body and all his whatever his belongings, his clothes he had, in the incinerator. And as Hanover's pulling up to drop Nurse Ratched off, Briggs is in her car, and you can see her. She strikes the match or a light or whatever, and you can see the light, and she lights her cigarette. So Nurse Ratched goes to get in the car, and she's sitting now talking to Briggs. And Briggs is like, oh, two women sitting in the car, what will people think? And the reason she said that was because when she initially went to her room after Charles left, Nurse Ratched was like, well, two women in a hotel room, what will people think? So now she's like being sarcastic, right? And so Nurse Ratched was like, oh, well, you know, I just, you know, you look distraught, and I just wanted to make sure that you were okay. And, you know, I think, you know, you leaving your husband is giving me, you know, the strength to be honest with myself. And, you know, I would love to go back to that place you took me to. That's where they had the oysters. And she was like, oh, you want to go on a date? She said, yeah, you know, I would like to go out this weekend. And so they agreed to go out the upcoming weekend. And so they go to they start walking to their rooms. Briggs go to her room. Nurse Ratched pretends like she's about to go into her room. As soon as Briggs is out of sight, she goes into Charles' room to go through her stuff. And that's when she found the file on Dr. Hanover. So the next thing you know, you see Miss Osgood. She's having her a nice little bath and a little drink. And so one of the maids come in and say, oh, you have a phone call. And so she's like, do I look like I'm in the mood to take a phone call? She's like, well, what was his name? Wainwright? Was that Charles' last name? But it sounds like a woman. So she gets on the phone, and of course it's Nurse Ratched. So they trade quips, and eventually Miss Osgood agreed to go to Lucia. And basically, I mean, so I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they interact, because they both seem to be crazy as hell. So that's going to be an interesting little dynamic once she gets to Lucia. And so the next day you hear Miss Cartwright's husband, like, what do you mean she's gone? In the background, and then you can see Nurse Ratched and Finnegan talking, and he's saying, telling her that he, got them on the train or the bus or something, and they're, they should be fine. And he just adores Nurse Ratched at this point, and he actually calls her an angel. You're an angel of mercy. And you should see the look on her face. I'm like, no, she's crazy as cat shit. I don't know. But, okay, you don't see that yet. Because I guess that's the whole point. She's a sociopath, psychopath. I don't know. But they're very good at hiding their crazy, right? And so she's now having a flashback of when she was helping with injured soldiers, and there was this one soldier. I'm assuming the same soldier had to have part of his leg amputated, and he is just suffering. You could tell she was like, he's already had medication, or they were waiting for whoever is supposed to administer the medication to come through to give this man some kind of pain medication, because he just looked like he was suffering. And he basically told her, I want you to kill me. And she initially said, I can't do that. I cannot do that. And then she saw how bad he was suffering, and she caved, and she ends up putting a pillow over his face and suffocating him. And that's how this episode ends. So it was a lot of stuff happening in that 50 minutes. And the things, it was moving so fast. It's like, oh my God, am I going to remember everything? I probably still didn't get everything. But that's what I was able to remember. And from the chicken scratch, aka my note, that's all I got for you guys for this recap. I'm going to end this here, and I will talk to you guys later.